So welcome everybody. I'm sure there will be a few more sort of coming in. We can see there's some people joining us. So welcome to this session on unsettling research ethics. So this is the first of three sessions, three related sessions. One now, one this afternoon, and then one tomorrow morning. The session has been proposed by a range of us that you can see there in the top of the screen with all our videos on. And you'll hear from many of us during the process of this morning. My name's Sam Stadden. I'm a lecturer in environment and development at the University of Edinburgh. And I'll hand over to my colleagues in a minute to introduce themselves, I think. This, just to let you know, yeah, this is the first of three sessions, and we are this morning going to hear from people related to a project that we're all involved in, that Clara here in the middle is leading. So you're going to hear from us this morning, both work that we're doing in Edinburgh, work that's going on in Latin America, work that's going on in Africa, and work that and that's what you'll hear from this morning. And then this afternoon, we're going to hear from a range of people that are also interested in research ethics from a range of other sort of quite large projects. And then tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, we'll hear from a range of people that are working on research ethics from their own sort of more individual researcher perspective. So I hope many of you can join us for the whole range of these sessions, all three of these sessions. You're going to see in the chat, Joseph here will put a link to the website of the project that we're all involved in. And then, yeah, I'm just going to hand over to the others to introduce themselves. So Clara.
Thanks, Sam, for leading and introducing each other. So I'm Dr. Clara Cadia. I'm a lecturer in clinical psychology at the University of Edinburgh.
Joseph?
Morning, everybody. My name is Joseph Burke. I'm research fellow at the Health of in the School of Health and Social Science at the University of Edinburgh.
And Lisa?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Bowden. I'm a professor of population medicine and veterinary public health policy at the University of Edinburgh, and I lead a project called One Health Field Network, which is in Syria.
And then Edgardo?
Hi everyone, my name is Edgardo Toro. I am social worker and associate professor at School of Social Work here in Chile.
Thanks. And then Cristobal?
Hi everyone, I am Cristobal Guerra. I am clinical psychologist working at the University Santo Tomás in Chile.
And Toby?
Hi everyone, my name is Toby Oshodi. I teach political science at Lagos State University in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I was just going the order that was on my screen there. So you'll hear more from many of us kind of during the course of this session today. So the other person that is really important here is Mo, who is our IT support. She's written in the chat there, saying that the questions will be posted in the Hoover site or the Zoom chat, and she's going to share those backwards and forwards. But it's probably easiest if you have chats to keep them in the Zoom chat here. I think the conference organizers are asking people typically to keep their videos and their mics off while the presentations are going on. But obviously, when we have any discussion, it would be really nice for people to put their videos on and we can see faces and have a better discussion. So then in terms of the timing, we've got 4 presentations in this first session. We're first going to hear from Clara. And then we're going to hear from Edgardo and Cristobal, and then we're going to hear from Toby, and then we're going to hear from a really related, sort of closely aligned project from Diana Duque in Colombia, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning for her right now, so we're all feeling a bit sorry for her. So thank you so much for joining us. So the presentations can be between, say, 15 and 20 minutes. So I'm going to time them and let you know when you're at 15 minutes. And then if you want to kind of round up then we have a bit more time for questions afterwards. So you'll hear from each of those speakers for 15 minutes, maybe a little bit more, and then we'll follow up with questions and then we'll move on to the next speaker. So I'm going to hand over, unless anybody has any other questions right now. Or Mo, is there anything else I need to say?
No, everybody is doing okay so far. And I hope you have a great panel though.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm going to hand over to Clara, and thank you all for coming.
So thanks, Sam, for the introduction, and thanks for everybody for being here. It's really exciting every time where we can meet online and discuss the work that we have been doing. And today I'm really pleased to share what part of the team that we just introduced now is working on this project that is called Doing Ethical Research Together. As you can see from this slide, there are some of us, they are come from the University of Edinburgh, others come from Africa, Europe, and Latin America, and we are working together on projects around ethics in global context. So today we'll summarize a little bit what I've been doing together in the last couple of years. And the purpose of today is to provide an overview of the toolkit, a framework that we develop to help global researchers, and also to use our projects as an example, as a project, an online project. The purpose of the toolkit is to support researchers and others involved in global research, to be a place of inspiration, but also share ideas and supporting each other. And also support individuals who want to change and bring changes in their own institution. So we have been doing this project in two phases. The first one was before the pandemic. We had the chance to meet face-to-face, organizing workshop in person, and then we moved to every activity online. And we don't know what this is going to end up. In the first phase, we had more or less 200 global researchers from 30 countries, 60 disciplines, talking about ethics in a critical and fair way. And we had colleagues from different kind of disciplines, as you can see, from Africa study, economics, or psychology, gender studies, political science. Why this was so important? Because when we work in a global context, we most of the time we work in a multidisciplinary team, and develop an ethics toolkit, an ethics framework that is inclusive of the different language and the different background was one of the key elements and our main drive to develop this framework. The different background was important to be sure that we were representing everybody. The first phase of the toolkit started with 5 workshops at the University of Edinburgh, where we were incredibly surprised that 100 researchers globally were interested to have this discussion around ethics. At the same time, we also conducted a scoping review, which is published, and you can find in our website. And at the same time, we also review the current policy worldwide. We developed the first phase of the toolkit. It was a long, heavy book. And I'm going to describe a bit better later this infographics, which is one of the key elements of the toolkit that we developed, was a summary of these 3 elements. So the workshop, the literature, and the principle. And we come back to the research that participated to the initial workshop, because we wanted to be sure that we represented, in a fair and coherent way, the discussion that we had in person. And we arranged 16 expert group feedback all around the world, where our colleagues invite their colleagues in their institution to discuss the toolkit. And then we created the first version. One of the main feedback that we received, that in order to be inclusive and accessible, to develop a website. So far we have the website, which is interactive in 2 languages, in English and in Spanish. And at the same time, we develop a pocket guide, which is available now in 11 languages. So these provide an accessible approach to the framework, with a long, extensive information through the website and the details, and a pocket guide for somebody that wants to have a quick understanding about the framework. The key message from the roundtable, so from this initial discussion with the global researcher, was that with an ethical worldview, we find much more similarities than differences among us. And ethics is a journey from research idea to legacy. It's not simple a paperwork in a single moment of our research project, but is a commitment to good practice with many challenges and dilemma where that can be found in place, people, principle, and precedent, where are also the potential solution. And to take an ethical action and to develop a case study, sharing solution, and became a place of inspiration for other colleagues. They also guide institutions to provide these changes. As you can see from this picture, from this infographic, this really summarizes the key element of the framework. So ethics as part of the research journey, from research idea to legacy. And this ethical consideration and reflection should be part of every stage of our research project. How we develop our team, how we run the grant proposal, but even how to who analyze the data, who is in charge of the analysis, which are the power dynamic, even how to translate this into practice. So each stage have their own specific research question and reflection that you can find in the website. As you can see, there are at the start and the end of the research journey, there are 4 P. So place, people, principle, and precedents is exactly where we found challenges and dilemma where might emerge, but also where the solution can be found. At the bottom, there are the essential principles that we discuss with the researchers that participated to this conversation. For example, don't harm or be brave and be safe. This is a table that summarizes more or less what we mean with 4P. What are the plays? So when we conduct a study in a global context, we need to consider that language can be different, be aware of the political or the economical context, as well as the emotional and psychological context, as well for people. So who is the researcher, the participant, how much we get in touch with the community, and who are the main person in the community to discuss the project, and how we develop our research team or the relationship with the funding agency. Same for principle and precedent. Principle are the values that guide us, are the expectation versus the risk, and the precedent are where we can find the policy or previous publication or work that conducted by other researchers in another context, another part of the world. They use a similar methodologies. So reading and sharing knowledge with somebody they already experienced the same ethical challenges can help us to guide us in finding an ethical solution. As part of the project, we develop case templates and different kind of templates, such as, one is the case templates to help us to discuss and reflect on the ethical challenges that we might find. So in this table, we put on the left side of the table the description of the ethical issue, in which part of the research journey we are finding the dilemma. This could be one or few part of the research journey, and in the third and fourth column we can understand a bit better the dilemma using the 4P and to stimulate the ethical reflection. And then in the last column, we can write the ethical responses as a shared discussion with our team. In the website, and as part of the project, we also develop several case studies. Of course, we are always willing to improve the potential case studies to share with everybody on our website. So if you are interested, if you have a case study that you want to share, feel free to get in touch with us. So far, we have 7 case studies, both in English and in Spanish. This is around consent form, because I decided to share case example on consent form because most of us had reflection, discussion around consent for our study. As you can see in the first column, we wrote the ethical issue, and then we identify using the 4P the reflection and the potential solution of the consent form. This is an example around a small community, for example, the power dynamics that the leader with the community might have. So for the second phase of the project, we have to confront ourselves with what we plan with the reality. And initially we want to create, our plan was to create an international network of global researchers, improve the toolkit, the templates that I show you now, and focus on Latin America and Africa, not only with academics, with global researchers from academia, but also involving NGO, who are important stakeholders when we conduct global studies all around the world, to understand if this framework could be helpful in order to improve communication, not only among academics, but between academics and tech sector. Then, as we know very well, pandemic started, so Corona influences our life, we cannot travel, and we have to run the project online. But this, creating a lot of advantages. For example, one of these, we are here online, and we come from different parts of the world. As you can see from this, I'm not in the UK, although I'm from the University of Edinburgh. This has a lot of advantages and some disadvantages. So we conducted the studies from Edinburgh, and because the project has been supported by the GCRF, but we could connect with our colleagues from Chile, from Nigeria, Malawi, Australia, and we could travel using internet. So was a really fascinating journey. At the same time, we also developed a case example about ethical challenges in a global online research. Thinking about the place now is not anymore face-to-face, but is online. So we have different time zone. For example, today there are people that are joining us from Colombia, and it's 4 AM, and this could create complication when we decide to collaborate together. Or different languages and culture and availability of internet. We take for granted that everybody can have access to internet, but we know well that is not true for everybody. So how we can be fair in order to allow everybody to participate to the conversation, how we make sure that we are following the right regulation. There are some ethical committee that support, for example, the use of Zoom. In other institutions, Zoom is not allowed, or is allowed in one moment, but after a few months is not allowed anymore for different kind of reasons. So which are the ethics committee that we need to apply for our project if we conduct the study online? So we start having questioning how to conduct an ethical research study online. So the journey in the second part has been not globally, but also locally, to stimulate ethical reflection in a different way. So we run workshop in Edinburgh, so locally, to stimulate conversation, how to improve ethical application and question in our, for example, online, in our ethics system at the University of Edinburgh. At the same time, we arrange workshop in Africa and in Latin America, with academics, also with researchers from the NGO world. And as you can see, that we were surprised also for the number of participants that participated this time to this conversation. We also had the possibility, working online, to participate to different kind of conference worldwide, and one of this is the one that we are having today. And we also developed really stimulating and interesting collaboration. One is, for example, with Tomorrow Cities, with a project globally. We arrange a workshop. We also develop a strong stimulating collaboration with the Minister of Science and Technology in Colombia, and we are really thankful that they are here today to present their work. We also work with a project together with Lisa with the Syrian refugee in Syria and its surrounding country. As I was mentioned before, we are discussing with the University of Edinburgh about how to improve the system at the university. We are working in Malawi with children, and a new entry is the new collaboration with the Indonesia, with this project in Indonesia, and we are planning to support researchers and to develop training there. So the practical learning on this phase.
You've had 15 minutes so far, just so you know.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sam. So there's been a huge appetite to learn about how to undertake global research. And we are planning to develop an open, online, free ethics training. And global ethics research include both formal ethical process, substantial reflective practice. So we are working within the university to understand and influence this interaction, and also enabling global research on ethics at different levels within the project in a different career stage, and global ethics research must be accessible in order to be ethical. So the reflection around using internet. I would like just to conclude briefly about how university and research institutions can support ethical practice in global research by reviewing the university policies and practice, questioning if they are fit for purpose, or considering innovation and breakthrough ideas for ethical research practice, how we can engage our expert global staff and partner, and at the same time undertaking strategic leadership and advocating for new paradigm. So the paradigm shift they are proposing for university are that ethics and that is governance should be seen as an integral part of one stage of research journey. And mid-project change or unexpected event should not be seen as an exception, but as our poor planning, but an expected part of a global research. And there be an encouragement and opportunity for researchers to speak up when confronted with ethical challenges. Ethics should be explicitly have both an approval, but also a support component. And ethics should be seen as a contextual, as I was mentioned before. So we're still in our journey. We would love to listen your feedback, and please feel free to get in touch with us. If you want, you can provide feedback not only on the framework or the template that I quickly introduced to you today, but you can be involved in a different way on the project. So please contact us if you want to complete a survey and to provide any kind of feedback. Thank you so much. So any kind of question related to the presentation, feel free. We love critical questions, so any kind of feedback is more than welcome.
Thanks, Clara, for that. We have 5 minutes for questions specifically at this point. I guess if we don't have any questions, we can always have more time right at the end, but please do. I think it's quite nice to ask questions when you've just heard a presentation, so that the first person doesn't get left behind, or you don't forget the questions. So yeah, feel free. Anybody, you can put your hand up with the reactions button at the bottom, or there's not many of us here. Turn your camera on and put your hand up if you want as well.
Thank you, Sam. So, of course, it was our challenge to summarize a couple of year of project in 15, 20 minutes. But the team is expanding. One of the future aim, apart from developer training, is also to create a global network of researchers with the aim of supporting each other when we confronted with the ethical challenges. And the website would be a place where people can easily get in touch to each other or download freely all the material that has been developed so far. So I will conclude my presentation. In case anybody has any question, even later, feel free to contact us. So Sam, I'll let you go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Clara. Do we have any questions at this point? You can also put them in the chat if that is easier. I think, did you have, yeah. Welcome, Kathy. We're going to hear from you later as well, aren't we? So welcome.
Thanks. No, just to say it was very, very interesting. And maybe we'll connect after that. I've got loads of questions to ask you. But I guess my one question was just around how you deal with research ethics committees, which are very university-based and not necessarily like in the development sector. We don't always have those. I was just wondering if you'd engaged with that at all, or what your thoughts were on that.
Thanks, Katie, for your question. So, as I understood, I don't know if I understood correctly, how we engage with ethics committee with related to the project. So, I think that the answer can be a different level. One that, for example, for this project, we apply to different ethics committee because the project has been conducting in different parts of the world, and so we applied for some ethics approval in South America, in Edinburgh, or in Africa. And we interact in a different level, not only apply for ethics in a different way, so I make sure that we respect ethical policy and procedure from different countries, but at the same time, for example, the work that we try to do in Edinburgh or in Nigeria or in other parts of the world is to have discussion about how things can be improved and why. For example, in Edinburgh, we ran a workshop about the system that we have in place there. And we ask global researcher, suggestion and feedback about, is the right question to ask to a global researcher? What questions are missing? What do you think that could be the right way to approach this topic? The world is changing. So for example, like I was mentioned before that we are running project online. This requires another level of understanding, good training around ethics. So we are trying to work a different level. I don't know, Katie, if I answered to your question thank you. Emma, I can see your hands up.
Thank you. So my question is around when you're doing collaborative research with researchers from different contexts, whose ethics count? So I had a few challenges of this. I'm doing my PhD at the moment, and I've had quite a few challenges. And so I have two brilliant groups of co-collaborators who I have an amazing relationship with. So my approach was, let's discuss everything, but really whoever's space we are in at the time almost gets to make the final decision, right? As long as we've discussed everything. My supervisors are incredibly unhappy with that because they want very UK sort of Western accepted ethics, very individualistic as opposed to communal. How do you decide whose ethics count?
Oh, but this is a fantastic question. Do you know what I was thinking? That because this is not a project, like I'm just coordinating the project, like this is the word that I use. This is a work that has been done as a team effort. And because they are here present, the collaborator, the rest of the team. So I would love if one of you will answer to Emma to this question.
Can I perhaps just respond to it if that's okay? And then we will pass on to Edgardo and Cristobal, who are going to speak next. I think, thank you both for those questions already, and they really get to the heart of actually a lot of the discussions we've been having as a project about how to engage, for example, with the University of Edinburgh ethics systems and the questions of, how we connect to the committees there, but also, which was Kathy's question, but also, whose ethics forms, as it were, or ethics principles do we go with? And this is something we're working out at the moment. I don't think there's an easy answer at this point. I like your thinking, Emma, with the one where you are kind of should really take precedent, I guess. you know, when we're online and in these strange times online, you know, how does that work then? You know, which country are we really in? Or so I think it's a great approach. Both of those questions, I think we could come back to at the end if we have any spare time. And I should have mentioned at the very end of at the end of our third session, we'll have some more time for discussion as well, because we've only got 3 presenters. So we'll be able to end the third session with, you know, a bigger amount of kind of discussion. So hopefully you can stay with us and join us then as well. But maybe Edgardo and Cristobal, we're going to hand over to you. And if there's any way you can pick up on those questions and what you're talking about, feel free as well. So again, just like Clara, I will just tell you when you've had 15 minutes and you can decide where you want to go with that. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah. Can you hear me and can you see the presentation?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. And hi, everyone. And we want to thank the organizer to make this event possible, you know, in this particular and exceptional time that we are living in. So we want to share with you a case analysis, you know, based on the model that was presented before, previously. And this case analysis is involved ethical conflict in research with immigrant and indigenous population. This work was made by Fabiola Peña and Christian Pinto, that they are not here today, and Cristobal and myself. So, a brief introduction. So probably the last 20 years, research in Latin America have increased in number, in quality, and complexity. And for this reason, we are faced several ethical challenges among the need to respect cultural diversity differences, because like any other part of the world, Latin America is a very multicultural continent, and you have this picture that shows us the countries, but at the same time we have countries, but we have also different indigenous people and population that is not coincident, it's not at the same time with the countries, so it's more expanded. And also we have differences between our process of colonization, and also we have the forced migration of the African people. So in words of Garcia Canclini, and I quote, Garcia Canclini explained that the Latin American and American people is an hybrid construction based on the contribution of European Mediterranean countries, Native American people, and African forced migration. So Latin America is a real and symbolic territory, heterogeneous. And indeed, it's quite heterogeneous. In this diversity, we have also like a modern process, the migration. You know, this is an historical process. Some of that migration is both natural and decision, but always forced for political reason, war, violence, of natural disaster as well. So some key point. We have a tendency in Latin America and so in America to carry out cross-cultural research. So this is a challenge for us because we need to achieve a kind of balance between global research ethic principles, but also local realities. You know? And this gap not all the time is fulfilled. And also we recognize the difficulty of balancing the ethical standard in different disciplines. So we are working in complex research, an interdisciplinary group and team. And we have an unbalanced development of the standard structure of an operation ethics committees. So we have, for example, some countries that have national standards and national organization, another is more local. So we have differences in there. So for this reason, we need to generate a toolkit and some tools that have to be sensitive to these particular cultural realities. Particularly when we are working with more vulnerable people or people that has been marginalized for the social structure. So this is the reason that we are thinking ethical challenge with the toolkit that we present. And then my colleague Cristobal is going to show the case analysis. Cristobal?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's why we think the model Clara presented is useful in this context. Because, can you hear me? I can repeat.
It's all good, Chris.
Because we think this model is useful because this model is not against the traditional ethics. This model pretend to apply the traditional ethics on the context. This is the pretension of the model, is to concretize the abstract ethics to the file work across all the research journey. Okay, next one, please, Edgardo. So we can share with you briefly three experiences working in our research team with indigenous population and immigrant population. And we discuss the three of these researchers are not similar, are not equal, because no research is similar to another, but there are things in common. Okay, we will share with you these common points. The first one is about the prevalence of child victimization in the Aymara population in Chile. The Aymara is an originary people from the north of Chile, Bolivia, Peru, and part of Argentina. And in this context, the ethical problem lies is about the results, because in Chile, there are stigma against originally people. So the results could be bad interpreted by the authorities, the society, increasing the stigma and the prejudice against this population. For example, briefly, if the prevalence of child victimization is higher than non-indigenous population, this could be interpreted as this population is more violent, which is not true in fact. Okay, the next one, please. The second experience was in Mexico, in the border between Mexico and US. A group of researchers from Mexico was doing a research in US with Latino population about the health access. But in middle of the research, there was a change in the immigration policy in US that prevents the researcher to go each day to collect data in Mexico, in US, from Mexico to US. So the dilemma here was if the research is going forward, okay, putting in risk the participants, presumably illegal immigrants, and as well as the researcher, because there is the risk to be charged by the US government. Or for the other hand, to stop the data collection, which is also a problematic issue because the research was relevant to that community in US, the Latino community in US. And the last one is an ongoing research with Latin American immigrants in Chile. In Chile, in Latin America, we as well have an internal migration. For example, in Chile, we have a lot of migration from Venezuela at this time and from Haiti in Central America. So we wanted to do a research about the factors associated with the well-being. But the problem the ethical problem was how to give voice to a variety of participants that make the data useful. This is important because there in Latin America, most of the, not most, but a good amount of immigration is not legal. So a lot of migrant people has this truth about researchers, authorities, as well there are linguistic barriers, difficult access to internet, as Clara previously mentioned, yeah, because we're in the context of COVID. This is the three contexts. The next one, please. So there are different research, but there are things in common. At level of place, okay, we need to see the local immigration regulations. We are in these three examples, there are two with immigration. The immigration policies in the US are very different to Chile. We need to take decision according this place in which we are doing the research. There are a stigma against immigrant or indigenous people, but I want to make a point here. In Latin America, there are a stigma against Latin American immigrants in Latin America. not if the European people came to Latin America. European people who came to Latin America and Europeans, but people who came from another Latin American countries are immigrants. This is the conflict, the stigma, the issue, as well with the indigenous population. And really important to ask ourselves, this research is relevant to the community more than us. About the people, it's necessary to reflect about the positionality, and if we have the skills to do a cultural a research with cultural sensitivity. Okay, as well, we need to evaluate the risk of the participants when you work with immigrant population, deportation, increased prejudice, etc. And as well the potential benefits, the balance between risk and benefits. You need to think about how to be fair with the recruitment, because you need to give voice to the people who don't have voice, who don't have the possibility to talk, to speak, to collaborate. Okay. About the principles, there are a lot of principles here. It's important to avoid the colonizing research. And when we talk about colonizing research, we don't talk just about the North colonizing the South, about the ethics committees, for example. The previous one, please, Gardo. We are talking. You can do colonizing inside your own country in Latin America, between the power groups against the more vulnerable groups. And there are other principles: the respect for the culture, the human rights, universal ethic principles, the local regulation, the methodological rigor. You have to balance all these principles together in the file. And finally, about the precedents, it's important to look for precedents when you face this kind of ethical dilemmas in your university, in the community. It's important to ask to the formal ethics committee, but as well to the committees in the NGO you are working with, in the community, to search for previous literature who faced the same issues. That there are the precedents. Okay. Now, Edgardo, please, the last one. And finally, after doing this kind of reflection in the three of these research, we choose some solutions, not the perfect solutions, but solutions that were useful in the specific context we was working. In the first one, about the prevalence, the solution in the three cases, the solution incorporate asking for help to another researcher. In this case, in the Aymara research, we consulted professionals with experience in the work with Aymara population, and as well read the protocols in the university to do this kind of research. The solution was four. First, we evaluate as well the factors that explain this violence. We don't just evaluate the prevalence of violence, we add the factors that explain that. We request for support to people to do the cultural interpretation of the data. We added a second phase of the project, a qualitative phase, to understand more the dynamics in the population. And of course, we wrote the reports carefully. In the research in Mexico and US, we discussed the issue with colleagues in both sides of the border. Okay, the decision was to go ahead with the research because it was potential beneficent for the participant. But the option the team took was trained a remunerated file assistant with American nationality, but who lived in America, in US. Okay, but that people was part of the Latino community, because Latino community, not all of them legal immigrant, didn't trust in American white researchers. That was the solution in that point. And finally, the last one with Latino American immigrants in Chile. We are in COVID, we are doing the research. It has been really, really challenging. We we decide the strategy of data collection with the community of migrants. We did a previous step in the research in order to ask the community of immigrants in Chile how they think is better to approach the community to recruit and collect data. So the decision was to recruit and collect the data in different options online with a anonymous link, and as well in paper and pencil, all mediated by the community, which as well has an advantage and disadvantage. And really important, we did the translation, do the survey in Spanish, of course, and Creole, the native language of people in IT, which is a variation of French, okay, in order to favor more broad participation. And I think this is, yeah, Edgardo, thanks.
You've had 15 minutes, just so you know.
Okay. I'm going ahead with this, Edgardo, or you? Me? Okay. This is just an example how you can apply this toolkit to analyze data. As you can see, different research are particularities. This is the place. You need to see the place, but as well, you can use what you learn in one research to apply to another. It's about reflection. Okay, it's not easy to apply the abstract ethics, the ethics of the books, in the concrete reality, which is diverse, which is complex. Okay, and this requires an operationalizing of the problem. This is why we think the ethical toolkit is not against the traditional principles. It's a tool to operationalize problem. Okay. And to operationalize problem, considering the place, the specific place. In our experience with these three cases, the toolkit was useful, okay, but they are not magic solution. They are not perfect solution. They are just possible or workable solution in our experience. But this is basically what we wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any question, Edgardo will be happy to answer.
Of course.
Thank you both. That was great. That was brilliant. And yeah, it's still 5, maybe coming up to 6 in the morning. So again, thank you for being so awake in your presentation. So we have like 5 or 6 minutes for discussion. So if anybody would like to ask Edgardo or Cristobal any questions, please, you can put your video on and your hand up and ask, or you can put that in the chat, or put your reactions hand up.
One thing I can share in these 3 cases, 2 of them, the case analysis was done after the research, you know, just to do an exercise about how to apply the toolkit. But the third one was doing in advance. We are using the templates in order to prevent ethical issues, and we are working with the templates across the research journey. And it has been a really useful exercise to us and to the research team. This is maybe an additional thing.
I think that's a really useful point, Cristobal. Maybe you could just tell us, I can see a hand up, maybe you could just tell us quickly, like, how did you do that through the research process? Did you speak to people, like when you had a project team meeting? Like, how did you practically use the toolkit?
Yeah, we did. This is a dissertation with the students. We did 2 or 3 meetings in order to apply, to use the toolkit to prevent ethical issues. So in the really early stage of the research, we planify this and we decide to ask the members of the community. So with this idea, we did an approach to some representative of the community, and we discussed about which are the best solution. it was not easy because they as well has not trust in us. But we did a good job in the relationship with them.
Brilliant.
I don't know
Thank
if
you.
okay.
Oh,
Is Fiorella there?
I can see that. Yeah, there's a question from Fiorella.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very, very much for your presentation. It's great to see the different, the different examples and really kind of reflect back on what, each of us is doing and what type of methods we can learn. I have a question about basically with COVID-19, we have seen that a lot of initiatives are conducting phone data collection instead of face-to-face interviews to reduce the risk of infection. However, these methods come with, with caveats and might deepen power dynamics within the household, within the community. So, who owns the phone? Who has the possibility to talk to talk on the phone when the interview is conducted? At what time of the day? Where is this place safe? And is this person talking from somewhere that the conversation is not overheard from someone else, etc., etc. So I'm really curious to hear from you what are the type of examples that you might have seen in your work, or whether you have thought about this unequal power dynamics when the face-to-face, more personal and more empowering type of relationships are broken in the current situation. Thank you very much.
I don't know if another member of the team can answer or want to answer.
I would like to say, because we are conducting some interview, that anyway, interview with professionals, so there is more equal relationship. But even in so power is a thing in the relationship in research. So sometimes we believe, because we have fantasies, that we have more power than the others. So this is an idea that we have in a more colonizing idea. But with the technology now, for example, people can decide when and how long would be the interview. And they can say more easily, say, for example, no, I don't have more time, 30 minutes. And we want 1 hour and a half, but they say, no, 30 minutes. So we know that the power, the mutual influence appears or works in the decision of things. So I think that these non-face-to-face strategies balance a little bit more the power. The other thing is the access to the technology. That's other discussion that is a main discussion, but it's other discussion. But when we have the possibility to do some techniques, some kind of relationship change as well, for this decision that they can make. This is one point, but we have unbalanced power as well. And we are doing the research. But I think that because we are in this uncertain time and more vulnerable time, we are more sensible with the people, and people are more sensible with us. So we are creating some kind of a relationship, the more sensitive for the work that we are doing, I think. But this could be a fantasy as well.
I could add, this is what Clara said. In the online global research, we are not working in Chile or we are not working in UK. We are working on internet. It's a new place. It's a new place. So we have to analyze the risk and the possibilities who this new place give us to our research. We need to analyze this in order to our people, because it's not the same to do an online interview to kids to an adults. It's a different. There are different regulations, and probably it's not the best answer, but we need to create a precedent. We need to learn to report what happened in this context of COVID.
Thank you both. That's a really good response. I think, Clara, do you want to say something quick?
Yeah, just to echo what Edgardo and Chris say. So Fiorella, thanks for your question, because it's really crucial. And we don't know when we are going to end it up with the online studies. I want just to give you an example of a study that I'm conducting with Lisa Boden, who is here today. So we are working with Syrian refugees before the pandemic and during the pandemic. We want, for example, to understand how people were living, the specific context situation. So this offers a great opportunity to us. Instead of us going to the community, We did the opposite. We asked the community to talk about themselves using internet, using WhatsApp, using their methods. So we were not anymore the interviewer, so the power dynamic, they were the interviewer about them. So they can share with us their stories. So we were here just to listen them and to make a coherent, and we were even able to come back to them and say, this is what we learned from you. Is this representing very well your story? So yes, pandemic put us in a really challenging situation, but at the same time, really offer us a great opportunity to be fair, to listen more, to allow everybody to be at the same level, on the same platform, without traveling. For example, for this conference, not everybody had the time, money, effort to be here. Well, with the internet, even from, Italy or from Chile, we can participate to discussion. The same for the toolkit. So, of course, we need to balance, the disadvantages that this might create. And we hope this is end up pretty soon. But I want to offer this example because Liz and I, we were, incredible surprised by the level of participation, and I'm still emotional to talk about this. You can see this story on the website, and Syrians can see their stories on the website. So sorry, a small bracket. So I hope, Fiorella, that we answered your question.
That's great. Thank you, Clara. I was going to say maybe, Lisa, you could put the website on the chat there and see. I was also going to mention, hopefully that you won't run off and do it, but there, at the same time as now, there are a couple of sessions on on research methods at a distance, remote research, so panel 7. And all of them are being recorded, so you can catch up with them in the coming weeks. So just, if you're interested, I'm sure there will be discussions around the ethics of that and the power dynamics of that in that session too. So Lisa can put the link, and then there was a question I saw from Doris, but I think maybe if you're able to respond to that in the chat, that would be great. Okay, so we're going to hand over to Toby now and his team to present from their experience, an example from Lagos State University. So I'll just tell you after 15 minutes, Toby, so you know where you're at.
Thank you, Sam. I hope these slides, you can see my slides now.
Yeah, if you put them into presenter mode, perfect. Brilliant.
Oh, thank you. So thank you so much. And thank to everyone that is actually joining our panel. We've been talking about the toolkit, and one of the things that the toolkit actually talks about is that ethics goes beyond applying for ethical clearance. It imagines a kind of network of support that goes from the beginning of the project idea up to the legacy. So what it means that the responsibility of the ethics committee may not necessarily be reduced to giving approval or disapproving research, but it can actually be more holistic. And it is in this context that I'll be sharing our own experience, trying to build what we refer to as an ethical ecosystem within our context in the Lagos State University, the Faculty of Social Sciences. The names on the first slide is actually the names of all the members, the 9-man and a woman, ethics committee. And I'm actually going to be presenting on their behalf, but also interjecting with some of my own personal experience. So 2 things. The first is to share our idea, our experience, and our aspiration, as I talked about. But the other is the second, which is also quite important for us, is to hopefully generate feedback after our presentation in terms of what others, have done in their own context. So those are the 2 objectives of this presentation. Going back, we understand that ethics is this system of this code of morality for researchers. We know it is about values. We know it is about standard. We also understand that there is a system, there is an institutional component to it. We are also aware of these ethical considerations, plagiarism, authorship, advocacy, and the rest of it. Clara talked about, the challenge of doing the project within an online context. What are the ethical questions that those raise? But if we step back from all this consideration and just black out and ask ourselves, within what context does this reflection, what we consider to be these ethical considerations, within what context do they germinate and do they flourish? We begin to imagine, for instance, what if I had not read a particular article that talked about certain precedents? How would I have conducted my research? What if I didn't participate in a particular class? How would I have learned about, this ethical idea, this consideration and the rest of it? Answering this question would actually give us this idea of ethical ecosystem, what it means, why there should be a kind of ethical ecosystem that supports the researcher from the beginning to the end. And in thinking about this ethical ecosystem, we're looking at three important points. One is about the researcher's action. It talks about the researcher's action within the research context, but also locating it within other non-personal cultural drivers within the society within which the researcher operates, exists. Then, of course, it can also go beyond the researcher. And we are sharing the experience of the ethical committee in my own faculty of social sciences, for instance. So it can actually go beyond the individual to the community of data champions, for instance, as was the case in 2018 at the Delft University in Netherlands, where a group of researchers took it upon themselves to encourage their colleagues, to manage their data, collect their data in more ethical ways. Then, of course, Clara also talked about the ethical project and the Infonetica, in University of Edinburgh, trying to, support, ethical research, the ethics structure within their own context. Then, of course, in talking about the ethical ecosystem, an ethical ecosystem exists not in isolation of other systems. In fact, we talked about the systems of ethics. For instance, today we are sharing the experience of our faculty's ethics committee. But in the university where we operate, and I'll come back to that in a few slides, also has its own ethical structure, architecture. There is the national body, for instance, there is the National Health Research in Nigeria, that has its own procedure and support system, and of course, international context. So now, with all this in mind, we conceptualize that ecosystem that we envisage as the complex processes, action, and structures put in place to embed ethics in our own context, in Lagos State University's Faculty of Social Sciences. Now, just a quick point. The university that I'm talking about is about 38 years, created 1983. The faculty that we are talking about was created a year after the university was established. But like most faculties, it was unbundled, there was that disciplinary surge. Economics, geography, political science, and the rest broke out, they were unbundled into separate disciplines within the. But in terms of ethics, while these departments actually teach ethics as part of their course, it was until last year that we began to seriously consider building this ethical ecosystem. Last year, August, we introduced the ethical committee for my faculty was created. December of that same year, the university came out with its research ethics policy, and that was, that was shared among all academic staff in the university. But I need to also point out, and that was the point I was talking about, the individual action. One of the things that I think positively contributed to this reflection within our own context was the fact that 2019, there was this fellowship that I got. And among other opportunities was to attend workshop conversation, it was the ethics conversation, at the University of Edinburgh, where I was, exposed to what researchers, Clara and her colleague, Professor Corinne Reed, and every other member of the team, what they were doing. I was interested, you know, I attended June 2019. My attendance of that, you know, workshop led to, you know, hosting an expert session, feedback session for the toolkit, for the draft document for in developing the toolkit at my faculty, which is also creating some kind of attention within the university, because those that attended the the expert section were within my faculty, but many of them were actually outside of the faculty. Then, of course, in June last year, we had this workshop. The workshop was originally meant for my faculty, you know, to discuss ethics, and how the title was Social Science Research Ethics. But at the end of the day, it became a university-wide program that the head of our university, the former vice chancellor, decided to take part in that. And all other management staff also participated in that workshop that had over 100, in fact, 165 participants. So that was already creating this kind of the Faculty of Social Sciences as a leader within the, you know, the university in terms of ethics. Then, of course, the Global Ethics Project. I was invited to the global to be a team member of the project, and that has really affected, you know, my own worldview and some of the suggestions that I've been making to the Ethics Committee. In fact, I was made a member of the Ethics Committee on the basis of the expert session, Research Ethics Committee, and of course, some of the ideas that the Global Toolkit, you know, talks about. Now, I talked about the LASU's Ethics Committee, because if we are talking about the Faculty of Social Sciences Ethics Committee, it is also going to be existing within the context of the university's Ethics Committee. That is also very new. And that is the context within which we talked about the newness of our setting. This document was released last year, December, after the workshop, after the expert session. And it created 6 ethics committees: the Social Sciences, Humanities, Research. That was after we as a faculty already created our own. But one interesting point that I hope I would still have time to talk around is that of this ethics committee, only the Health Research Ethics Committee is, you know, functional, and it has been so for probably over 15 years now for health research, those doing the medical research. So what it means is that for my colleagues to get ethical clearance, we need to either go to the University of Ibadan, which is a distance from where we are based, or go to the Health Research Ethics Committee to get ethical clearance for our work. So the idea of our ethical project, you know, I mean, the ethical ecosystem is to create not only our own ethical research ethics committee, but also to create that support system. And we'll be talking about sharing those 5, you know, ideas, what we've been doing, and some of them actually aspiration, what we plan to do to solidify that ecosystem. One is training. And the training we talk about is not only for our students, it's also for staffs, you know, where we encourage colleagues to share experiences, not only about their research finding, but about the ethical dilemmas, challenges they faced in conducting their research and how they were able to navigate that. And in doing that, we would have been creating some kind of precedence for other researchers that will be doing similar research within the faculty, solidifying our capacity. Then, of course, the university architecture that I talked about also built within it its own training component. The faculty ethics committee will be keen into that training agenda and also trying to get the best out of it. Then, of course, our student, and I'll be coming back to our student, because the student component for the ethics committee is considered fundamental, crucial. And we're actually going to be focusing on our students in terms of building that ethics ecosystem. But of course, we'll be intensifying the training that we've been given within the various disciplines, as well as, you know, what they do when they go on their field research. And of course, the fact the ethics committee is actually thinking of introducing an integrity course for all our students, so that before you graduate, you must have taken a kind of elective course on research ethics, encouraging you. But one other benefit, one other approach to building our ethical ecosystem is that we are going beyond the disciplinary confinement, Yes, there is always that tension, ethical tension across disciplines. But because research increasingly is also becoming multidisciplinary, so we're also going to be benefiting in a kind of multidisciplinary setup where we have context platforms, where we take, research persons from across the various disciplines to speak to our students, to help them build that multidisciplinary foundation for their research. And of course, the ethics committee that we talk about is made up of people from across the various departments. So from that point of view, no department would actually be dominating the others, because the others are actually represented in that committee and they can actually make their own intervention. And this is one of the most interesting points, building block for us. In making our ecosystem student-centered, we understand that, yes, ethics should be taught in the classrooms, but it should also go beyond the classroom. It should also have space on Twitter, on social media, where students are actually free and encouraged, supported to discuss their ethical challenges and dilemmas among themselves. Once in a while, they can actually invite their lecturers to also intervene and also share their own experiences. So the ethics club is something that we've, at the last count, we already have like 57 students being members of that ethical clubs. And of course, like the training that I talked about for the staff, student workshop would also be a component. But one other interesting thing, and this is actually unique, not only in the history of the university, but in history of many universities in Nigeria, and I'm not sure whether other universities elsewhere are actually doing that. From this year, for the next 5 convocations, we'll be awarding ethics award. If you look beneath the screen, you see this award for the best student, the best graduate, being given cash award and the rest of it. We can't match that cash award, but we can actually project our students that are doing very ethical research on the best day of their studentship, which is the graduation, and making them, walk on the podium and being awarded for just doing ethical research. So that is one other component that we are actually very passionate. Then, of course, collaboration. Ethics, in terms of building the ecosystem, yes, we are building it to solidify staff and students within our context. But we also understand that ethics can not only be dynamic in some context, but of course, there are instances where as researchers, as students, we collaborate with other colleagues outside of our own context, outside of our own faculties. So how prepared are some of our own students if they don't, and even colleagues, if they don't have that, opportunity of collaborating, reaching out to other researchers interested in ethics, that we can, have this conversation, this global conversation, whether it is in the global south or in the global north. 15
minutes, Toby, just so you know.
Brilliant, Sam, thanks. So one of the benefits of the Global Research Ethics Project is that it has kind of projected us, it has offered us opportunity not only to have interaction with Clara, with Sam, with Chris, Edgardo, Action, and the rest. These are actually colleagues that are not within Nigeria, but outside of Nigeria, outside of the continent, that we're talking about. Then, of course, because the ethics project is also thinking about this global network of researchers interested in ethics. Now we have contact with colleagues at the University of Ghana, Cape Coast. Then, of course, in Kenya, we have this brilliant university that is also interested in what we are doing, ethics, that we can actually build on that collaboration with. Now, we're trying to build this ecosystem within our faculty, but we ask ourselves certain questions. If you're going to build an ethical system, do you need the management? Do you need other ethics committees outside of the Faculty of Social Sciences? Do you need even non-academic? And I used code because I prefer to use non-teaching. Non-academic may be actually a problematic term. But do we need non-teaching staff to be part of this ecosystem that we are building? And the answers to these questions for us is yes. And that is why, as part of our ethics committee, we have somebody that is a non-teaching, staff, being there to also advise us within the context of where, where they work, because we think that ethics and doing ethical research may not be actually restricted to what academics do. You also need the non-teaching component, non-teaching staff of the university to also key into that idea. And I will be happy to respond to. Now, in conclusion, before concluding, we have these 5 building blocks. But because we are new, we also know that we can actually leapfrog by learning from colleagues outside of our own context in terms of what they've done to solidify, or even the challenges they are facing as a university, as members of ethics committee, what they've been confronted with that can become useful for us going forward. Of course, we also know, this is not a conclusion. We know that the process is not going to be easy. What if our students, for instance, don't key into our ethics club? What if the management, the new LASU architecture, ethics architecture, pulls the carpet from underneath us? What happens? What should be our response? So we also assume that there will be a number of challenges going forward. But I'll just stop here, and I'll be happy to get your feedback, get your question, and get your advice as to what some of your own experiences has been. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Toby. That was great. There was so much detail in there. There was lots to take in, and it's really nice to hear all of that. We have a few minutes for questions. I want to make sure that we have enough time for the last speaker as well. But yeah, does anybody have any questions for Toby? There's a question I can see there from Kathy. Would you like to ask that? Would you like to put your... Or Toby, maybe you can read that and see if you want to respond. A lot of discussion we've been having is around decolonizing research and ethics and how to be more inclusive of different knowledges. I'm just wondering if or how you're engaging with this and challenging Western norms in your ethics work.
Sorry, thanks for reading that. I was struggling with my mute button.
That's fine.
Thank you so much, Kati, for that, brilliant question. And as a researcher in Africa, especially, maybe I should say this, especially coming from this tradition, of the radical political science. The radical political science is actually one that, so much key into this idea of decolonizing the academia, decolonizing research, decolonizing knowledge production. And one of because my fascination, I'm not sure if Clara and my other colleagues know about this. One of the reasons I decided to attend that conversation, and be part of this project is just, so many things, but one is quite important. And that is actually the contextualization of ethics. Contextualization of ethics. Contextualization of ethics actually speaks to the idea of decolonizing ethics so that we don't have this, this new concept of ethics dumping. The place, if you take the 4 Ps, which is one of the most brilliant contribution of the toolkit, I mean, the project, if I may say that, talks about not superimposing your ideas, your knowledge system, and the rest in a different context. As a Nigerian scholar, if I'm conducting a research, it will be colonizing if I'm taking everything, the precedents, the literature, the ideas from the global north, from UK, from Western, from the US and the rest of it. But if you have a toolkit that actually prioritizes that local context in the sense that place, and I'm sure if Clara would have had time to discuss fully the idea of place is not only about, where the researcher is coming from. Maybe you're based in Belgium, for instance. No, place is about the context of research. And especially when you talk about global research, the place is multidimensional. And what the toolkit talks about, you must reflect that multidimensionality. Then, of course, precedence. Precedence talks about existing body of knowledge on research that you need to benefit from. One of those precedents is actually the traditional knowledge system. And decolonization is also a very, nowadays people actually just throw it around. Sometimes it is, I see it as being instrumentalized for obvious reasons. But decolonization is actually multi-layered. As academics, yes, we may be championing decolonization, but do you know that decolonization is actually going on at other dimensions? If you take religion, for instance, the churches have decolonized Christianity in Nigeria for years, but academics are waking up to talk about decolonization. You understand? So the toolkit talks about that traditional system, knowledge system that should not be forgotten, which is actually the elemental to any discussion of decolonizing knowledge. We need to reflect the silenced voices. The silenced voices included, in this context, the traditional voices. And if you remember in 2017, the Sans people in Southern Africa, they came out with a brilliant idea. And they came out with their own ethical guidelines, because as researchers, we go into the San culture, we research them, and we read, for whatever, probably for citations and the rest of it, we write these beautiful articles cited by thousands of people, but denting the image of those culture. And they came out to tell us that this is not good. And they gave us their guidelines. The ethics toolkit that we're talking about actually lays emphasis on those kind of knowledge produced from bottom top. And in fact, the idea of building the toolkit, it's also not, the global north coming down to discuss with the global south. No, and that's why I actually like using the, conversation. It's a conversation, ethical conversation. We're having a conversation. It's not, the document is actually co-created by over 200 researchers. But the point is that, like you rightly said, decolonization is something that it's, as a political scientist, I know that it's, the current wave. There are different waves of decolonization. 2 weeks ago, we had a conference on decolonization, the IFE conversation on decolonizing the academia. And one of the things we came to the conclusion of was that this is just another wave. Peter Eke in the 1940s talked about exactly the same thing about decolonizing. In fact, Claude Eke wrote 1980s social science as imperialism, where the bottom line was actually decolonizing I won't want to take much time, but I think your point is quite important. We need to be conscious of that as scholars from the global south. Thank you.
Toby, that was a brilliant response, and Kathy, it was a brilliant question, and I think it gets to the heart of what the whole conference is about. The theme of the conference is about unsettling development, and really the point of these panels was to think about how do we unsettle development through research, through a focus on ethics. So yeah, thank you so much for the question and the response. Okay, so we're now going to go to our final speaker in this session, but a reminder that we've got one this afternoon and one tomorrow as well. So I'm going to pass over to Dayanira. I think I pronounced it wrong. Dayanira. Clara says it differently. Dayanira. So I know you want to share your screen and a video.
Innovation. Everything is going?
Yeah, could you make it full screen?
Okay.
Is that possible?
Okay.
So Dayanira, thank you so much for coming to speak.
Form the basis of scientific ethics, the Colombian experience. First of all, I would like to tell something about this ministry. The vision of the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation of Colombia is to formulate and coordinate public policy for the generation of knowledge, innovation, public engagement, and competitiveness, enhancing regional and sectoral capabilities. It's in this institutional framework that the ministry adopted the bioethical research ethics and research integrity policy in 2018. The purpose of this policy is to promote the appropriation of a culture based on ethics, bioethics, and research integrity that promotes and guides collectivity, participatory, and plural reflection in science and technology process developed in Colombia that guarantee the quality and relevance for social development with justice and equity. One of the objectives of Colombia's bioethical research ethics and research integrity policy is to issue guidelines on research ethics. This net aroused in the policy design process by showing that there are not minimum agreements that guide the decision-making of the various actors that are part of the national system of science, technology, and innovation of Colombia. That men, researchers, research ethics committees, financiers, entrepreneurs, civil society. Likewise, the existence of minimum of guidelines for arguments of the foundation of scientific practices partly reflects the maturity of the institutionality and governance of the Colombian ecosystem. This paper details of the progress made in this process. We will begin by justifying the need to form a basis for scientific ethics and what it entails. Then, we will show the methodological process through which this purpose was developed to finally present the proposal of principles and behaviors that we are submitting to validation by the various actors of the Colombian ecosystem. Why do we form a basis for scientific ethics, and what do we mean by it? Insofar as science, technology, and innovation is recognized as a determining factor of social development and the productivity of companies, the institutional, social, and legal environments for the generation, the transfer, use, and appropriation of science, technology, and innovation, which continuously acquires greater importance in societies. Best environments influence or condition scientific practice, as well as scientific culture, which why they are not the sole responsibility for the researchers, but of all the various actors that are playing in the ecosystem. In recent evolution of scientific ecosystem in Colombia, actors such as entrepreneurs, innovators, unions, and technology managers have been acquiring a greater role in the definition of policies, agendas, and priorities for science, technology, and innovation. This has happened in Colombia, both nationality and locally. Although with great disparities in the different regions of the country. In this environment, the interinstitutional articulation between entities is crucial to achieve an impact on the ecosystem. That is, for the knowledge to be adopted at the development strategy. Subsequently, the various actors' contribution depend on their roles and responsibilities in the aforementioned. For these reasons, since the actors and their interests are diverse, although they are part of the same scientific ecosystem, it is necessary to establish ethic guidelines that dictate the acceptable conduct of these entities in the direction of common minimums, which is based on the development strategy in a knowledge society. Likewise, this foundation allows for the consolidation of the institutional framework and governance system for the national system of science, technology, and innovation. From various sociological approaches, it is affirmed that the institutional, social, and legal environments constitute a kind of primary conditioning factor for the behavior and decisions of the actors, since they integrate the social and cultural capital of a society and function as a collective reference. This relationship, explicit or not, between the behavior, the concrete practices, the various actors, and the rules and agreements, tacit and explicit, of a community constitute the institutional ecosystem that defines governance. In this relationship, values and principles articulate, link, connect individual practice with the ecosystem and vice versa. But above all, it defines the frameworks of responsibility for each of the different actors. The sense of responsibility as the capacity that each individual has to recognize and act according to their sense of duty with respect to the community to which they belong to and for which recognition and thought acquires meaning in the scientific and environmental ecosystem, as well as the technological, by permeating the practices of generation, use, and appropriation of knowledge of the various actors, by which it is conformed and sustained its institutional framework and governance. Some approaches to the study of scientific communities suggest that institutional, social, and legal environments arise and are maintained by the same scientific practice. These practices include routines, rules, habits, among others, that allow for the functioning of the scientific and technological ecosystem, since they involve its various actors, albeit in a different way, because they fulfill different roles. The diagnosis that gave rise to the policy at hand pointed out the absence of common minimum guidelines to orient the behavior and decision-making process of the various actors in the ecosystem. Second, how to advance in the definition and adoption of minimum guidelines. We understand the guidelines as a series of orientation that seek to harmonize practice of science, technology, and innovation, as well as the roles and responsibilities of the various actors of the national system of science, technology, and innovation to direct their various actions towards a common goal. These guidelines must take into account diverse interests as a condition of possibility of existence of a community that supports practices and validates a knowledge society so that they can efficiently guide the various entities in a timeline and pertinent manner. To identify or define these guidelines, workshops and interviews were held with experts from all areas of knowledge to try to identify, based on an analysis, characterization, and classification of the conflicts and dilemmas that these actors face in daily scientific practice. We have pointed out how this practice defines the scientific and technological ecosystem. So we start by answering two questions addressed to researchers from different areas of knowledge. First, based on your background and experience, mention the conflicts and ethical dilemmas that you have faced and research process. Second, based on your background and experience, what would you consider to be the main responsibility of researchers when designing and executing research projects? The analysis of the answer to this question by other experts, also from various disciplines, yielded as a first result a series of conflicts that were classified as follows. First, conflicts relating to concepts, standards, and principles. For example, conflicts in the risk-benefit assessment of research. Conflicts of interest. Second, conflicts of interest. Third, conflicts about the social relevance of research. For example, methodology for prioritizing agendas and science, technology, and innovation. For conflicts related to research integrity, for example, conflict between open access, confidentiality of information, and the protection of copyright, patents, and plant varieties. 5, conflicts derive from the lack of norms, guidelines, and training, for example, to carry out interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and multidisciplinary research. 6, conflicts conflicts to the relationships with research subjects and communities. For example, conflict to the lack of recognition of the participation of subjects and communities. 7, conflicts over the functioning and scope to the research ethics committees. As a result, based on the conflicts identified, as a series of principles were defined that first, will be functional to the various areas of knowledge. Second, will allow them to guide decision-making process in cases of conflicts and or ethical dilemmas in such a way as to lead the various actors in their solution. In this way, the following principles were defined, which in turn were complemented with the behaviors associated with each one, both at the individual and institutional level. Integrity, rigor, accountability, suitability, justice, ethnic and cultural diversity, autonomy. On a daily basis in science, technology, and innovation process, decisions are made on aspects as diverse as the budget management of a project, the declaration of conflicts of interest and confidentiality, the collection, systematization, and security of data, among others. This wide range of responsibilities, some of which may refer to the observance of specific norms, like citation, for example, while others address more complex aspects, for example, the selection of participants, require that the various actors of the scientific ecosystem share some minimal agreements. These principles, what we present for consideration, must be discussed and valued collectively, considering that is in an iterative document which is constantly updated, in the same way that the scientific practices evolves iteratively. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Dayanira. Thank you very much. That was really great. I love that you prepared it already. That was very organized. It was great to see. So I know we are out of time, but if people want to stay just a few minutes more, if they have some questions for Dayanira, I'm sure we can stay on. Just before we go to questions, just to mention, if people have to go, we have another session this afternoon at 3 o'clock. And then another one tomorrow at 10 in the morning. And as a reminder, those are not related specifically to the toolkit that we're involved in, but they're showcasing the work of other people in their own projects and what they've been doing with regards to kind of unsettling the research ethics they're involved in and the good practice that they're involved in. So Dayanira, do you have time for a few questions? Do you have any questions from the audience?
Hi, Sam. It's Bukola.
Hi.
Hi. I'm presenting tomorrow morning, so it's been really helpful. I have a question probably for the panel in general, not necessarily for Dinah. Is that okay?
Yeah, That's
okay. Well, some questions and some comments. I mean, thank you very much to everyone who's presented. I think I really appreciate it. So the funnel approach in terms of presenting a framework for us and then having those specific examples in those specific contexts of how the framework has been applied in certain ways. One of the first thoughts I had was around the principles, and I'm quite interested in the idea of sort of relationality and relationships and interconnectedness. And I see that the way the principles being presented right now, sort of presenting the principles in a way in silos. And I'm sure the idea of relationships sort of underpins the principles, but I wonder if there were any thoughts around extracting or being more explicit around the interconnectedness between the various principles. So, you know, how are people related to place and principles, and how are those undergirded by certain precedents? So this idea of the interconnectedness within the different, between the different principles in the framework. And picking up on the idea of relationality as well, there's one of the participants had a question for, I think, the group, the second group, and she talked about sort of an implication of the loss of relationality in the online COVID space. And I was thinking about that from a different perspective in terms of working with traditional and indigenous communities who tend to really value relationality, and they value relationships. You know, what are the implications of this new direction towards more online mediums where there is a loss of relationality? What are the implications of that for doing research with those kinds of communities that really, really value relationality? And I think in terms of the group that discussed, again, the second group, I was wondering whether in your work with the Aymara community, for example, in Chile, whether you had any thoughts around trying to incorporate sort of Aymaran worldviews within your research ethics. And you talked about including professional researchers who knew about Aymaran communities and sort of their values. But I was wondering whether you thought a bit more about incorporating sort of Aymaran worldviews and epistemologies within your research. And then finally for Toby, I mean, very, very interesting presentation with your work in Lagos. And I think I was just really curious in terms of the development of this ecosystem and how really nascent it is and how recent it is, and whether you had any thoughts around whether that is sort of a general trend across, say, other similar universities or social science faculties, maybe even in the southwest of Nigeria, in terms of the nascence of the creation of an ethical ecosystem, and whether obviously you guys you have lessons learned and experiences to share with them, and whether that's also part of your current thinking in terms of sharing your knowledge and your work with those groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bukola. That's a lot of questions. I'm not sure we can address all of them now, but it's great. And I think at the end of the third session or the third panel, we will have more time for discussion, which will be good. I think maybe if I just sort of mention names and then maybe you could speak to those. So Clara first, maybe around the kind of the relationality between the 4 Ps, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, just quickly. So thank you. Really interesting, fascinating question. I found, super lovely. I think, Chris, like you are the best person to reply to this rich question, at least to the first part. Why? Because Chris has the courage and the strength to apply to ethics in Mexico, in Colombia, in Chile, and so he had to face different kind of policy and regulation, and the hard work of incorporating them. So Chris, maybe like if you can reply to both of these initial part of the question that Bukola asked us, that would be fantastic. I think that you are the most appropriate person to reply.
It is about the relationship between the 4 Ps, if I understood correctly. Yeah. Yeah. In my view, I was thinking about that. In my view, the most important P is the principles, because in the principles is the core. In the principles, you have the traditional guidelines, but as well you have the balance between that traditional values and the place. So the principles, in my opinion, Clara, I don't know if I represent all the team, in my opinion, is the most is the key. Then the principle should be associated with principles on place, principles from the people, and the precedents are in the background, which give you information to move the three of the other piece. And at the same time in your research, you create new precedent. This is what I imagine. I don't know, Clara, if I am answered all the question, but
yes, because Bukula was trying to, the question was how we incorporate in the principle, you know, like in the rest of the 4P, and how the challenges of doing this. So, of course, for example, in the case of South America, where we try to apply to different ethics committee as well as in Africa, because we want to be respectful, because we really didn't want to involve researcher from another country before involving the ethics committee. We receive different kind of answer, a different kind of approach. So our role as a team was to incorporate the different kind of observation and feedback in one single approach. So so respect to different policies is important. So again, if we don't want the colonies or don't want to impose our approach to ethics, because as you can imagine, UK has a strict, strong, and long regulation around ethics. We need to listen and we need to work together with different kind of ethics committees. So we spend the initial part of the project exactly to identify the best strategies and way to incorporate different kind of policies. And only with researcher locating in the specific country can do this. So again, one of the reasons that I use the word coordinator is because we can achieve ethical conversation only if we are together and we can respect our differences. And so this is my answer to the first part. I don't know if I answered properly, Bukola. So if you want, you know, like I'm happy to discuss even further. Chris, then Edgardo, then, you know, there was more a specific question related to your work in South America. So if you want to reply to this.
So probably we have an idea, not a good answer, just an idea. So research and academia as an activity, as a human activity, is no different for the culture and the society. So for example, Latin America is very diverse in the recognition of the indigenous population. For example, Colombia, Bolivia, Guatemala is a more pluricultural state. In our case, it's a little bit different. So probably we are moving as a society in Chile and also as a researcher from the more integration by assimilation to integration by diversity. What means that? That we are recognizing all the part of the indigenous culture that we live in the daily life. So probably we have to move to not just specialists or researchers that understand the culture Aymara, and to incorporate and recognize that the people that live in the north, researchers that are natural in the north of the country, they have these ideas and this knowledge and this cultural background that is Aymara. So in our case, for example, we live in the center, probably we have in our words, in our understanding, some of the, no Mapuche in our case, but see more central indigenous knowledge, but we don't know that. So we are start to recognize this part of our multicultural and our hybrid life. But of course, we have to move on to the more incorporate the communities, no? As part of collaborator of our research team. That we are not doing that yet, but we are recognize that. So these two movements, to incorporate and recognize that we are not indigenous people, but part of our understanding and our knowledge and our comprehension of the life that is there. Is there, no, in this our culture. No good answer.
Thank you, Edgardo. I want just to add one small things before let Toby to answer to the last question. One of the reason that the work that De Janeiro presented is so important and why we are collaborating with her in such a rich way is exactly for this reason. They are developing, they are in the process of developing, and the methods that they're using to develop the policy in Colombia is powerful and fascinating. And the idea to be partner, be part of this conversation, help us to understand how the process can be done, which kind of implementation, how to stimulate fair conversation. And this creates richness not only to the team that is working on the toolkit, but the team that is working in Colombia. So we hope that, you know, more conversation that we have about ethics, more ethical we can be, and we can disseminate the word. So like it's not, you know, like a one single direction. So thanks, Dejanira. I can see that you are moving around. I'm really thankful for your time, your effort. Thanks, really thanks, Dejanira. Sorry for adding this, but for me it was important to recognize that this work. So Toby, if you want to answer to your question.
I think that
okay.
my principal concern is about how to different actors can really help us for improve our national system or science of science, because now there are many actors, new actors. So how we can to say that these are good science and that these are good results, and that results can help us to develop. That is my principal concerns. So we are now, I think, is our beginning in this subject. So we have still a long way, a long road. Thanks.
Thank you, that's great. Okay, Toby, do you want the last minute?
Yes.
And then I feel we should round up this part of the panel.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Bukola, for that quite important question.
Oh, and maybe we've lost Toby. He's in.
Oh,
we can hear you again now.
Yes, yes. So I was just trying to say that the best way to see the 4 Ps, for instance, is not to see them as disconnected. They're actually interacting, you know, because if you talk about the place, you know, there's a context within which you also relate it to, you know, people. The people live in the place, you know, the people also have the precedence of doing things and the rest of it. So they are interconnected. But to your question about whether or not the faculty will be reaching out beyond the faculty to other colleagues in the Southwest across Nigeria. Yes, in fact, the idea was to host the first ever African ethics conversation at Lagos State University, which would have brought together researchers within Nigeria, but as well as outside of the country, to share experiences, to think about, you know, these issues. So, but one interesting point that the global ethics toolkit talks about is this idea of legacies. And that is important in the sense that regardless of what happens, we are struggling, we are hoping, praying to leave a kind of legacy at the end of the day that will be useful to other researchers. And when I talked about teaching students, there is one interesting point I also didn't mention. The students today will be the lecturers tomorrow. Those that, for instance, are on our ethics committee, 4 of them graduated from my university. So imagine the implication of they being, we are trying to leave a legacy. And I was making the point that students today will become lecturers tomorrow. 4 of the members of our ethics committee are we're actually students. So, and our students, we are not only teaching them to teach in LASU, but they'll be going to other universities elsewhere to become teachers. So if we give them that solid foundation, they can actually use it wherever they go. I think I'll just stop because the internet is not too good.
Thank you, Toby. That was brilliant. And I'm sure we can pick up on many of these points throughout the next session. So our next session starts at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and then the final session at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So thank you to everybody who has presented. many of us here, and we're going to hear from many of the others, Kathy, Bukola, and Doris. We're going to hear in the other sessions as well. So that's great. So thank you all, and see you later. There is, if anybody wants to go at 12:15, there is the plenary, the second plenary, which is about race and development. And I've sat in on some of the roundtables, and there's been really interesting discussion about race and what that means for development, but what it means for academia as well. So yeah, I'd encourage you to go to that if you want. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mo.